Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will speak before a joint session of Congress toward the end of May. Most observers think he will offer a breakthrough peace plan for the Middle East. A report out of Israel claims he will consent to hand over control of the Temple Mount and other holy places to international sovereignty. True or false? We'll find out today on this edition of Politics and Religion.
Look, there are two things I don't discuss: politics and religion.
In my house, we don't talk about politics and we don't talk about religion.
I'll talk to you about anything except politics and religion.
I never talk about politics and religion.
Politics determines how we'll live here on earth. Religion determines how we'll live forever. I'm Irvin Baxter. I think it's time we talk about it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, to say the least, it is going to be an interesting year. Yesterday, it was announced that Ron Paul would enter his presidential campaign, and everybody is a little bit more used to the idea than they have been previously. He's always been labeled as somewhat of a maverick, somewhat of a radical. I mean, after all, he actually wanted to dissolve the Federal Reserve, and he actually wants to get out of the United Nations, and he actually wants no income tax. Could you vote for a radical like that? I mean, that's all a lot like our forefathers who didn't want a central bank and who made it unconstitutional to have an income tax and did not want us in entangling alliances like a world governmental system like the United Nations. Is Ron Paul too much like our founding fathers for us to vote for him today? I don't know, and I'm not telling you that I favor Ron Paul. I was just analyzing briefly a few of his key positions. I do remember this, though, back when the presidential debates were happening back in 2008, and he stood there with about 13 other presidential candidates, and they came to him and they tried to intimidate him because he was against the war in Iraq. He said it was bankrupting the American people, and he also was for getting out of the United Nations and for the abolition of the income tax. And they said, well, how are you going to finance the government if you get rid of the income tax? He said, oh, we can do fairly well because in 2008, the government could have gotten by without the income tax if we would have just done away with it, because we have raised the size of our budget between 2008 and now then, and I believe I'm quoting him correctly, we have raised the size of our budget far enough that we've absorbed all the income tax anyway. If we would have frozen government just about 6 years ago, we could have abolished the income tax and all the other taxes we've raised in the meantime. We would have been all right. Now, please don't hold me to that exactly because I'm really going off the top of my head right now, but I do know that it was something like that. So very, very interesting. And when you realize that back, I think 50 years ago, we had something like 1 out of 278 Americans working for the government. Today, isn't it something like 1 out of 3? No wonder the tax burden is heavy. Maybe we just need to throw government in the dryer and shrink it down. Can you imagine what would happen if all these people that are pushing papers and requiring you to fill out papers and requiring all kinds of bureaucracy? Can you imagine what would happen if those people were out there actually building something or producing something or running a business? Can you imagine all that incredible surge of new power that all it's doing right now is living off of you and me? Well, anyway, we're going to see, but it's interesting because most people attribute the founding of the Tea Party to none other than Ron Paul, and most people can attribute the huge Republican gains in the 2010 elections to the Tea Party. So does that mean that Ron Paul is really responsible, and will he be able to turn that kind of popularity into the Republican nomination? And if he actually became nominated as the presidential candidate for the Republican Party, does he have any chance whatsoever of beating President Obama in the election? I don't know the answer to those things. However, we're going to find out over the next, 11, 12, 14, 18 months. It's going to be very interesting to watch all of this unfold in front of our eyes. But a lot of people wondered about it. Could this happen? Well, now then it looks like perhaps it is happening. Also, in the meantime, I want to make sure I point out to you that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is going to be coming to the United States of America toward the end of May, and he has been invited by House Speaker John Boehner to address a joint session of Congress. Now, this at a time when Israel has come under unprecedented pressure about her position in the Middle East, and at a time when the Palestinians are threatening to go before the UN General Assembly and ask them to recognize the Palestinian nation and ask them to admit them as a full-fledged member of the UN. Now then the U.S. is saying, no, we're not against that. We're not for that whatsoever. And in the meantime, Germany has said we're not for that either. And other nations in Europe are now falling in line because they understand that this will lead us into uncharted waters. Nevertheless, he is scheduled to be here to speak about a month from now or so. And this report was published in Israel today, and that is that the prime minister in his speech is going to propose some breakthrough developments, and some articles out of Israel are saying that he and Obama are corroborating together to produce a peace plan. Let me see if I can, in particular, tell you about one thing that he is supposed to say. A Kuwaiti newspaper, Al Jarida, reported that Netanyahu will present a diplomatic plan next month that includes Israeli acquiescence to a preliminary Palestinian with Eastern Jerusalem, a preliminary Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. The paper also claimed that Netanyahu agreed to hand over the Temple Mount and other holy places to international sovereignty. Now, as we go through the program today, I want to ask you a question. You think that's true or false? Here this report comes out of Kuwait. The Israeli government is denying that this. Let me just read to you what they responded. There was never any secret meeting between attorney Yitzhak Moko and Saeb Erekat, who is the Palestinian representative to the peace talks, the Prime Minister's office said, and therefore it is also clear that the alleged contents of the meeting have no basis in reality. So I have this question for you. Do you believe that Netanyahu may be considering the internationalization of the Temple Mount? And if you believe that, why do you believe that? The Prime Minister's office is denying that this has basis in actuality. Of course, what they really said was there was never a secret meeting. They may be saying it wasn't secret. We did it openly. I don't know what they're saying. But since there was no secret meeting, then there was nothing coming out of the secret meeting. Maybe we did talk about what you're saying, but it wasn't in a secret meeting. Therefore, the report has no basis in reality. Now, politicians would never sidestep issues like that. I know that. But in case they would, that's a possible scenario. Okay, well, we want to talk about that today. We also want to take your calls today. I'm going to just sort of throw calls in as we go along because it's very, very important. And let me remind all of you out there that we do ask all of our callers to call once a week maximum. That way there's room for other callers to call. So please don't forget that, callers, because we do want to share. We don't want to share the wealth, but we do want to share the airtime. Anyway, let's get to the phones. Calling on the internet. Hello, Darrell. Darrell, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. I'm on the phone.
Okay. What do you have on your mind?
First, let me say happy Easter weekend.
Thank you.
And I got some good questions for you.
All right.
Let's get into it. Now, the national ID card, I know when it comes out, it's similar to the mark of the beast, but if it comes out, do you think it would be the same thing? Like if people were to accept that, they wouldn't be allowed into the kingdom of heaven, or will they still be able to get saved? Or You're not sure?
Darrell, when it actually becomes the mark of the beast, if you take it, you'll be eternally lost. Now, what we're experiencing right now is preliminary to the mark of the beast, and this is one thing that makes it so dangerous, is because at some point Christians are going to have to draw the line and say, sorry, I don't go one step further. And we're going to have to make that decision. Now, we haven't even entered the final 7 years yet, so it's my opinion that we cannot take the mark of the beast today. However, I am still attempting to resist every step toward the mark of the beast or toward the national ID, because the national ID, if it goes on unchecked, will ultimately become the mechanism by which they implement the mark of the beast. So for that reason, I really think we should try to stop the national ID. Our forefathers understood that a national ID would enslave us. Therefore, for 230 years, we have never consented to a national ID, even though some totalitarian type people, some super government management type people who want to control you, want to control me, think we should have a national ID so they can track us all and control us all. But we have always held out against that. Well, now then, they're trying to push it through again, and we actually have a law in the books called the Real ID. If we don't stop its implementation, we're having a national ID, because the Real ID is a national ID. Anybody that tells you the Real ID is not a national ID is totally dishonest, and they are being deceptive, because it absolutely is. So that's where we are on that one. Darrell, what else you have?
I know we're part of the UN, and we're also friends with Israel, the United States. But do you think, like, once the UN attacks Israel at Armageddon, what side do you think the United States will be on? Are we still going to be Israel friends or neutral, or, helping them help UN attack Israel?
Well, I don't know the answer to that for sure, and it's a really important question for all of us as Americans to consider. We have used our veto power to protect Israel in the United Nations. Now, the best thing that could happen would be for both Israel and the United States of America to get out of the United Nations, because the withdrawal of America from the United Nations would pretty much dissolve the United Nations. We're probably not going to do that, sorry to say, because there are people who believe in global governance, very high in power. Matter of fact, both parties believe in global governance. The only person that would probably get us out of the United Nations would be Ron Paul if he became our president, and I don't even know whether he would have the political muscle to pull that off or not. But anyway, will the United States of America actually participate in the invasion of Israel at the time of Armageddon? Well, let me tell you what the Bible says. Revelation 12:14 says that when the dragon, which is the Antichrist, when he pushes at Israel to try to destroy her, she will be given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she can fly into her place where she's nourished from the face of the serpent for times and half a time, for 3.5 years. So what this is telling us is it looks like the United States is still going to be standing by Israel at that time. And even though right now we're waffling, we still, when the chips are down, are standing by Israel. For example, it looked almost certain that the Palestinians were going to go before the UN General Assembly in September and say, we want statehood. But all it took was one strong stance by President Obama and by Hillary Clinton to say, we do not favor this. We are not going to stand for this. And bingo, all of a sudden, Abbas withdraws his plan, and he says, okay, we will not apply for membership in the United Nations until there is a peace treaty that's actually accomplished. So that shows when the U.S. really takes a stand, we're able still to influence the course of the world. Be right back.
Endtime Ministries presents End of the Age, a 30-minute commercial-free TV show hosted by Irvin Baxter. Every Monday, End of the Age airs on the Church Channel at 9 p.m., Daystar at 10 p.m., and on TBN every Wednesday morning at 7 a.m., all Central Standard Time. On End of the Age, Irvin depicts how modern issues like an establishment of a one-world government, the religion of Islam, a coming World War III, and more line up so clearly with Bible prophecies written over 2,000 years ago. To get tomorrow's news today, be sure to tune into End of the Age every Monday on the Church Channel at 9 p.m., Daystar at 10 p.m., and on TBN every Wednesday morning at 7 a.m., all Central Standard Time. Visit endtime.com for more details or call us at 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463.
The Bible prophesies about 4 great spirits